Jake hesitated for only a moment before answering, his voice breathless and unsteady. "I'll choose the massage." Of course he did. He always looked at me as if he couldn't wait to devour me, as if he was willing to do whatever I commanded just to be close to me. I smirked, leaning in slightly, my breath teasing his ear. "Wrong choice," I whispered, my voice dripping with amusement and control. "You're going to feel how soft, smooth, and beautiful my skin is, but you are definitely not going to do too much. And you won't touch me remotely inappropriately. Do you understand that?" "Yes, ma'am," he stammered, his body visibly tense. His nervousness was delicious, thrilling me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I smiled, placing a soft peck on his cheek. "Good boy." I handed him a small bottle of scented massage oil and then made my way to the bed, draping myself across the soft sheets. "Now come on. We don't have much time. Ethan will be back any moment." Jake hesitated briefly before stepping forward. He uncapped the oil, his hands shaking slightly as he poured some onto his palms. The scent of lavender and vanilla filled the air. As his fingers made the first tentative contact with my back, I could feel his hesitation, the way his breath came in heavy, uneven bursts. His hands trembled at first, barely grazing my skin, but as the seconds ticked by, his touch grew firmer, more confident. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to sink into the sensation. His hands were warm, moving in slow, deliberate circles over my shoulders, then down my spine. It felt good. Too good. A soft moan escaped my lips, unbidden. I felt his hands pause for the briefest moment, but I knew what I was doing. I knew the effect my voice had on men, how that soft, seductive sound could drive them mad. I had turned men into desperate fools with just a whisper of pleasure in my youth, and now I was using that same power on Jake. His breath hitched, but he continued, his hands pressing into my back, kneading the tension from my muscles. He was trying so hard to stay composed, to be respectful, but I could feel his restraint slipping away with every passing second. His hand slid lower, skimming my waist, lingering at the curve of my hips. Then he hesitated. I smirked, letting out another soft sigh. I could sense the internal battle waging inside him. The poor boy was completely under my spell, yet he was trying so hard to be good. How adorable. But I wasn't done playing. I shifted slightly beneath his touch, allowing the towel draped over me to slip just a little lower. His fingers brushed against my exposed thigh, and I felt his whole body tense. He was losing control. His breathing grew heavier, his hands more eager, more daring. His fingers pressed into the flesh of my thighs, massaging slow and deep, his movements almost hypnotic. Another moan slipped from my lips, louder this time. I wasn't just enjoying the massage. I was reveling in his torment, his desperation. I could feel him trembling behind me, his self-control hanging by a fragile thread. He thought he was in control, that he was seducing me with his touch, but in reality, he was the one being seduced. He was the one falling apart. Then his breath ghosted over my ear, the warmth of it sending a delicious shiver down my spine. "Please, Lillian, can I just..." "Shh," I whispered, cutting him off. You don't get to make requests." He tensed, his body stiffening. I could practically hear his heart pounding. "Now get out." "No, no," he blurted out, his voice filled with desperation. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you, please." I lifted my head from the pillow and turned to meet his gaze, my expression calm, unreadable. "Don't make me repeat myself, Jake." My voice was softer this time, more dangerous. "Get out. Now." He looked at me, his eyes wide with something between longing and regret, then hurriedly stumbled back, leaving the room without another word. I watched him go, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across my lips. He was completely and utterly mine. I had seen that look before, the look of a man trapped in the palm of my hand, unable to escape the pull of my presence. He didn't just want me, he needed me, and I knew exactly how to keep him wanting more. I sank back onto the bed, stretching lazily, feeling victorious. This was a game I had played many times before, a game I had mastered. Show a man affection, make him feel desired, then, just when he thinks he has you, pull away, leave him longing, aching, desperate. The push and pull, the intoxicating dance of power and seduction. Jake was no exception. I had him exactly where I wanted him. And the best part? This was only the beginning. Later that day, Charles called to check in, telling me he would be returning in 2 days. Imagine hearing your husband is coming back home, and instead of feeling happy, you're already dreading his presence. I didn't want him back, not yet, not when I was enjoying my little game. I knew I had one more day to make Jake suffer for using his big mouth the way he shouldn't. So I planned to take things further. Ethan had gone out with his girlfriend and I was feeling good. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the evening breeze through the open windows. I lounged in my bedroom, clad in nothing but a silky nightgown, contemplating my next move. The thought of Jake alone in the house made my pulse quicken. He had spent the day avoiding my gaze, flustered and shaken from our last encounter. That was about to change. Needing something from Ethan's room, I walked over, my bare feet padding against the wooden floor. I didn't bother knocking. Why should I? This was my house, after all. As I stepped inside, I was greeted by the sound of running water. The ensuite bathroom door was ajar, steam spilling into the bedroom like an invitation. And then I saw it. The curtain wasn't fully drawn. Through the misty glass, I could see Jake's silhouette, his toned body glistening under the stream of water. I should have left. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, my fingers twitched on the doorknob before I took a step forward, my curiosity, or was it something more, getting the better of me. Before I could think twice, my hand reached out and I slid the curtain open, revealing him completely. Jake gasped, his body freezing mid-motion, water cascading down his sculpted frame. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His arms tensed at his sides as he turned his stunned gaze toward me. "Lillian, what the hell?" he stammered, his voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. I let my eyes trail over him, slow and deliberate, taking in every inch of him. He was breathtaking. His skin glistened under the soft light, each ridge of muscle perfectly sculpted, droplets clinging to his body in a way that made my throat go dry. My gaze dipped lower before I dragged it back up, meeting his wide, panicked eyes. "Well," I said, tilting my head as I leaned against the door frame, "you've seen me like this before. I only thought I'd be fair and see you too." Jake's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed, his fingers twitching at his sides as if debating whether to cover himself. But he didn't. He just stood there, frozen in place, his jaw clenched so tightly that I could see the tension ripple through him. "Lillian, you can't just..." "Can't what?" I cut him off, my voice smooth as silk, my lips curving into a slow, knowing smile. "You think I don't notice how you look at me? How you want me?" Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his wet hair, slicking it back as if trying to collect his thoughts. This is dangerous," he murmured, his voice strained, his body betraying just how much he wanted me in that moment. I stepped closer, the air between us thick with heat and something neither of us wanted to name. My fingers trailed along the edge of the damp counter beside the sink, my nails making the lightest sound against the surface. "Dangerous?" I echoed, feigning innocence as my gaze flickered down his body again, lingering in places that made his breath hitch. His hands curled into fists, his entire body rigid, as if he were using every ounce of self-restraint not to grab me and press me against the cold tiles. And God, I wanted him to. For the first time, I felt myself wavering, my own resolve cracking as I took in every inch of him. The heat in my stomach pulled lower, a dangerous, delicious ache that I hadn't felt in so long. I was losing control, and that wasn't part of the plan. I needed to snap out of it before he noticed. Clearing my throat, I forced a smirk onto my lips and took a slow step back. "You should finish up," I said, my voice steady despite the way my pulse hammered. "I don't want you catching a cold now, do we?" Jake let out a breath he had clearly been holding, his muscles still tight with tension. He didn't move, didn't say a word, just stared at me as if trying to figure out if this was real or if he had imagined it. I turned on my heel and sauntered out of the bathroom, but not before letting my eyes sweep over him one last time, imprinting the image of him in my mind. Closing the door behind me, I leaned against it for a moment, exhaling slowly. My fingers tingled, my skin burned, and my body betrayed me in a way I hadn't expected. I wanted him. No, I craved him. But I wasn't going to give in. Not yet. This game was far from over, and Jake was already caught in my web. Now I just had to make him beg to stay there. I woke up to the soft glow of morning light streaming through my window, stretching lazily as I reached for my phone. The moment I unlocked the screen, my heart skipped a beat at the notification staring back at me. Ethan didn't return last night. Mom had other plans. I'll get Dad tomorrow from the airport. My fingers tightened around my phone as I read the message again. Ethan wasn't coming home tonight. That meant another day alone with Jake. Our final day. I exhaled, feeling a strange mix of emotions flood through me. Excitement, anxiety, an annoying, restless hunger. I had spent days teasing him, seducing him, pulling him close, only to push him away at the last moment. And now it was our last opportunity. But why did it feel different now? Why did I suddenly feel vulnerable in a way I hadn't before? Was it because deep down I wasn't just playing anymore? Brushing the thought aside, I climbed out of bed, slipping into a silk robe and letting it hang loosely off my shoulders as I padded barefoot toward the kitchen. The scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the air, and I smiled to myself. Jake was already awake. When I stepped into the kitchen, my smile faltered. He was there, sitting at the counter, phone in hand, absently stirring his coffee. But something was different. I tilted my head, studying him. "Morning," I said, letting my voice drip with warmth. He barely glanced at me, mumbling a simple "morning" before returning his attention to his phone. Not once did his eyes wander over me the way they had every other morning. Not once did he shift uncomfortably or steal those guilty glances at my exposed skin. My brow furrowed slightly. "Did you sleep well?" I asked, stepping closer, hoping to reclaim my control. He nodded but didn't answer, his thumb idly scrolling down his screen. Something was off. I leaned against the counter, crossing one leg over the other, allowing the robe to slip slightly, just enough to hint at the curve of my thigh. "Jake," I pressed, my voice softer, more coaxing. He finally lifted his gaze, but when our eyes met, I felt a sudden shift in power. There was no desperation in his eyes this time, no flicker of tortured lust, no helpless craving or submission. Instead, I saw something else, something unreadable, something almost distant. I swallowed. "Are you all right?" His lips parted slightly, like he wanted to say something, but then he hesitated, his eyes flicking away as he took another sip of his coffee. And just like that, the control I had wielded so effortlessly for days felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I straightened, suddenly restless. "Jake," I tried again, my tone firmer now, demanding his attention. He finally looked at me again, but this time I felt exposed in a way I never had before. His gaze wasn't filled with hunger or torment. It was calm, steady, and unreadable. And for the first time since this game had begun, I felt uncertain. A slow, uneasy heat crawled up my spine. What had changed? Was this his way of getting back at me? Was he trying to turn the game against me, to make me feel what I had made him feel all these days? Helpless? The thought sent a thrill through me, but also something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. I turned abruptly, my heart pounding as I strode back to my room, closing the door behind me. Leaning against it, I exhaled sharply, my breath coming faster than I expected. This wasn't right. I was always in control. Always. I paced the length of my room, arms crossed over my chest, as I tried to analyze the shift. Did he see it? Did he notice the way I had looked at him yesterday? Had I given too much away? I couldn't let this happen. I wouldn't. I had spent too many days bending him to my will, making him beg with just the whisper of my touch, the promise of something he could never have. I wouldn't let him take that away from me now. I stopped pacing, taking a deep breath as I composed myself. No, this wasn't over. Not yet. I had spent days playing my game, keeping him at arm's length while teasing him to the brink of madness. But today I would make sure he remembered exactly who was in control. Jake had gone out for what seemed like forever, and with each passing hour, my emotions tangled between longing and dread. I had spent the day pacing, my mind teetering between reckless desire and the caution that should have restrained me. When he finally returned, stepping through the door with an air of casual indifference, my breath caught in my throat. Was I relieved or terrified? I wasn't sure anymore. The uncertainty of the morning still lingered, his cold demeanor, the way he had evaded my attempts to lure him back into my control. He had seen something in me yesterday, a flicker of my own desire, and it had shifted the balance between us. That scared me, but I wasn't the type to back down. If I had lost my grip on him, I was determined to reclaim it. I slipped into a silk white nightgown, a piece so delicate and revealing that it was impossible to ignore. It cascaded over my curves, the fabric whispering against my skin as I stepped out of my room, feeling every bit like a goddess ready to enthrall her subject once more. The gown draped just right, exposing the soft swell of my cleavage and the smoothness of my thighs. I wasn't leaving anything to chance tonight. Taking a bottle of wine, I walked into the dimly lit sitting room, calling his name with quiet authority. Jake! He appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded, his body tense, as if bracing himself for battle. Hey, he said, his voice controlled and measured. How was your day? I smirked, tilting my head as I poured the wine into 2 glasses. You're doing your best to sound so composed, as if you've suddenly built some kind of resistance, but I know better. I took a sip, letting the taste linger on my lips before speaking again. Come sit. He hesitated, then moved toward me, taking the seat across from mine. I handed him a glass, watching carefully as he took it. Silence stretched between us, thick with tension. Then, slowly, deliberately, I licked my lips before biting them softly. His grip on the glass tightened, and there it was. The flicker of desire in his eyes before he turned away, as if fighting against it. A surge of triumph coursed through me. He was trying to play the game now, trying to act as though he was in control, but I could see past it. His restraint was breaking, and I was going to push him over the edge. So tell me, Jake, I said, leaning in just slightly, letting my voice dip into something softer, sultry. How would you say your experience over the last few days has been? His jaw tensed, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. It's been... He hesitated, then exhaled, shaking his head. It's been the best break I've ever had, but also the worst. I arched an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, and why is that? His eyes burned into mine, intense and unreadable. For a moment, I thought he would hold back, but then, as if something inside him snapped, he whispered, "Because of you." Feigning innocence, I tilted my head. Me? He ran a hand through his hair, looking away as if frustrated. I thought I could handle this. I thought I could resist you. But you make it impossible, Lillian. Every move you make, every word you say. He exhaled sharply. You drive me insane. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my lips. "Are you saying you didn't enjoy all this time alone with me?" I whispered, my breath warm against his skin as I leaned in just slightly closer. His body shivered, just barely, but I noticed. The tension between us became unbearable, a palpable force neither of us could ignore. Then, suddenly, he stood, his hands clenched at his sides. "I'm sorry for calling you old, Lillian," he said, his voice raw, filled with something dangerously close to desperation. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. I was just being a fool." Satisfaction curled inside me, but even as I basked in his words, my own hunger for him gnawed at me. He had admitted it, surrendered to me in every way except the one that truly mattered. And yet something held him back. I rose to my feet, stepping close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The energy crackled between us, an electric pull neither of us could deny. I reached up, brushing my fingers lightly against his jaw, then whispered in his ear, "I forgive you." Before he could react, I placed the softest, most fleeting kiss on his lips. His breath hitched, his entire body stiffening, as though every nerve inside him had ignited at once. But I pulled away before he could deepen it, before he could take control. No, I wanted him to come to me, to finally cross that line himself. I stepped back, keeping my gaze locked onto his. "Now," I said with a playful smirk, "let's dance." His eyes darkened, his breath uneven. For a moment, he didn't move, just stood there, looking at me like I was something he couldn't quite believe was real. And then, finally, he reached for me, his fingers brushing against my waist as he pulled me close. As the music played softly in the background, we swayed together, our bodies pressed just close enough to tease, to torment. I could feel his heartbeat hammering against his chest, his breathing shallow, his hands hovering just above where he truly wanted to touch me. And as we danced, I knew it. This was the moment where the game would end. He would either shatter completely and claim what he wanted, or step away forever. And God help me, I wasn't sure which outcome I wanted more. The evening stretched into what felt like a dream. For the first time in a long time, I was happy, truly happy, and I felt special. I couldn't remember the last time I had danced with any man, or the last time a man had held me the way Jake did, looking at me with such raw desire in his eyes, as if I were a goddess he couldn't wait to worship. We moved together to the music, the air between us thick with tension. He had been trying to control himself all night, touching me with careful restraint, as if afraid of disrespecting me. Little did he know that was precisely what I wanted. For him to let go, to take control, to sweep me off my feet and claim me with confidence. I felt the air shift. His touch, hesitant at first, grew more assured. His fingers lingered longer. His grip on my waist tightened, pulling me closer. The warmth of his body against mine sent a chill through me. Then, suddenly, he turned me around to face him, his hands firm on my hips, his gaze searing into mine. "Lillian," he whispered, looking at me as if I had completely undone him. He was a man who had lost all his strength, all his resistance. I wasn't sure what he would do next. And then he said softly, "I'm sorry." Before I could respond, he pulled me into a deep, hesitant kiss. That kiss was everything. It sent a thrilling chill through my body, igniting a fire deep within me. He kissed me with hunger, with a desperation that made my knees weak. But then he pulled away abruptly. "I'm sorry, Lillian, Before he could finish, I silenced him by pulling him into an even deeper kiss. This time, I let go of everything, every inhibition, every restraint. I melted into him, surrendering to the passion that had been simmering between us for days. His hands roamed my body, exploring me with reverence, as if he had waited forever to touch me this way. He ran his fingers down my back, pulling me closer, molding my body to his. My skin burned beneath his touch, every nerve igniting in pleasure. His lips traveled from my mouth to my neck, planting feverish kisses down to my collarbone, making me gasp. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me to the couch, laying me down like I was the most precious thing in the world. His eyes drank me in as he hovered over me, his hands tracing every curve, memorizing every inch of my body. He worshipped me with his touch, his lips, his breath against my skin. I had never felt so desired, so cherished. He took his time, savoring the moment, making me feel things I had long forgotten. Every kiss, every caress sent waves of pleasure coursing through me, and I found myself lost in him, in the way he moved, in the way he whispered my name like a prayer. Our bodies intertwined, moving together in a rhythm that felt like fate, like something that had been meant to happen all along. I clung to him, holding on to the moment, not wanting it to end. The heat between us built to an unbearable peak, and when we finally gave in, it was nothing short of perfection. Afterward, we lay tangled together, our breathing still heavy, our bodies still humming with the aftershocks of what we had just shared. The dim light cast a soft glow on his face as he turned to look at me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Lillian," he whispered, his voice laced with emotion. I smirked, tracing a finger down his chest. "I should be thanking you. I missed this." He exhaled deeply, his fingers brushing my cheek. "What happens next?" he asked, his voice uncertain. I smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. "Tomorrow will be fine. You don't have to worry about it." For now, in this moment, there were no worries, no guilt, only us, lost in the warmth of the night and the passion that had finally consumed us.